Welcome today to add AI competency into your student success program. Today's webinar will be recorded and will be sent out tomorrow by email from my colleague, Carla Lundman. And today's session, if you have questions, please enter them in the chat window. And if you want to enter them anonymously, you can use the Q&A section of the screen, and we can either address them during the session or at the end of the webinar. And a little bit today about human eSources. You want to move to the next slide? Great. Human eSources is a worldwide leader in the development and provision of online personal assessments, student success, and education and career development programs. We also have a free resume service that you can learn more about at humanesources.com. And today, Nick Rabinovitch is here to talk about ways we can build artificial intelligence competency into student success programs. Give you a little bit of background about Nick. Nick oversees the educational content of human eSources products and the resources that support those products. He works closely with educational research consultants and performs his own research to continuously improve our current suite of products. Nick has worked in the online education and career development field for over 20 years. And prior to that, he spent 7 years as a high school teacher covering several subject areas, including biology, physics, math, and psychology. Nick has a Bachelor of Science degree in Biological Sciences and Psychology, a Bachelor of Education in Secondary Education, and a recent certificate in Data Science. And I'd like to welcome Nick to today's call.
Thanks, Tamara. Always a nice ego trip when Tamara introduces me to all my stuff. Thanks to everyone for coming out today. I know your time is valuable, and hopefully I can provide you some value in that time. The outline, just really quick today, we're going to get your perspective on AI first, and this is going to be sort of a valuable model that you're going to see throughout this webinar today, where we're going to sort of practice what we preach. So it's important when you're using AI, especially chatbots, that you understand your own biases going in. And technically, that's true with any type of information gathering, whether it's traditional media, other people, or AI. You want to understand your own biases going into any kind of conversation or place where you're going to gather information. So we're going to get your perspectives on AI going into this. We're also going to do a quick definition of what is AI. Hopefully, I'm going to provide a new definition that you haven't heard before. I did a lot of research on this, partly because I'm fascinated by it, but also because I want to provide value and an LLM. We're going to talk about strengths and limitations, best practices. That's the real practical takeaways for everyone here, hopefully, and maybe what the future is about. It's always a little murky, but we can do our best. Any questions on that? There's going to be a little bit of participation in this, but hopefully nothing that's going to scare anybody. So we're going to start, like I said, your perspective. We're going to start with some polls, and Tamara's going to bring them up there on the screen. And just want you to rate a single choice of where your knowledge of AI is, and then check all the instances of how you use AI.
Give people a minute to get sorted. You may need to scroll a little bit for the second question, the second part. Looks like everybody got it, though. Give people a quick minute to answer.
And then we'll display those results up for everybody and talk about it a little bit, just so we know.
And I can share them. Should be able to see the results.
So most people here have a pretty good knowledge of AI, at least at a self-rating level. And for one person who has a strong understanding, hopefully I'm not repeating too much information you already know. And it looks like
feel free to chime in the chat as well.
Yeah. If you have anything unique that maybe I didn't give as an option in the poll, please let us know. And also with your use of AI, it looks like nobody avoids it, and lots of people use it for the typical things. Nobody's here for coding or doing any machine learning. Not surprised by that. Does some pretty advanced stuff. I've only recently gotten into because of that course that I took, Tamara mentioned. So hopefully my experience can help everybody here. And we'll move on to the next poll. So it looks like people are fairly open to it, but we'll really get an understanding of that with these next polls.
And that one is institution.
Oh yeah, this will be one at a time. So
Policy.
this is just what your policy is at your institution. So this will affect obviously how much you are able to use it yourself, but also how much students are able to use it in your courses. So this will impact some of the practical takeaways later.
I just realized I think I might have made a typo in that poll. Is it now allowed or not allowed?
It should be not allowed. Yes.
I'm so
Sorry about
sorry.
that.
Where's autocorrect when you need it?
That would be in order of increasing permissiveness from as you go from top to bottom,
Okay,
at least for the first
I
three.
will end and I will share that as well.
Okay, so quite a few it's not allowed, or hopefully that's if people thought it's now allowed or not allowed. Maybe if you can do into the chat if you entered that incorrectly because of the typo there, that should have said not allowed instead of now allowed. So if you put now allowed meaning now allowed and it is allowed, then please let us know that. So because that might restrict some of what you can use or take away here, but maybe the information we can talk about today will help some of the administrators who set those policies understand the potential value of using AI in a very um, organized way and in a sequenced way that we're going to talk about. Okay. All right. So it looks like there were a few incorrect. Okay, let's take a look at the next poll. This is the last one. I know I really front loaded these, but it was important to get this information out. So a little bit of fun with this, some of the references, but still want to know what your beliefs are, what your general feeling is for the future regarding AI. And of course, there's a lot of science fiction reference there, but obviously with a question like this, you kind of have to go into the realm of science fiction.
Now, which movie called it?
Yeah.
And I think we've got everybody, so I will share the results here.
Okay, so generally positive, and that's not a surprise. You signed up for this webinar, so there's a generally a positive outlook on that. And yeah, I mean, the answer, obviously, no one knows the real answer, but it's going to be up to us as people and how we use this technology, whether it's something positive or negative. And I'm sure that's something that everybody realizes here, but we've had lots of big tools in the past, everything from when we had the Gutenberg press back when publications came out and reading and up to nuclear atomic age and computers and now AI. So, and every time, there's people who are the extreme pessimists, the extreme positives, and then people who land somewhere in the middle. It looks like we're kind of in that crowd. So that's good to see. All right. So now that we know our perspectives going in, we can move forward with what is artificial intelligence? So basically, it's anything that can simulate human intelligence. And what is human intelligence in this regard? Well, we self-defined it as being an egocentric species. We will define these concepts of intelligence, learning from data, reasoning, making decisions, understanding language and other input, and adapting over time. That's in italics because right now, AI has a bit of a limitation in terms of adapting over time. And that would be the biggest difference of those 5 bullet points between AI and human intelligence. We're constantly adapting because we're living in our world, we're experiencing it, all the inputs that are going in, the outputs, it happens in real time. Whereas right now, most artificial intelligence has sort of a finite time limit based on data that it gets trained on and then gets cut off. Um, and I'll explain that a little bit more when it comes to LLMs, large language models. So this is sort of the underpinning of AI, particularly around chatbots. When it comes to some of the research I mentioned in the polls about machine learning and looking at data, that's different than large language models. But 90% of what consumers out there, including educators and students, use in terms of AI is large language models, chatbots, understanding language. And basically what it is, it's just a type of software that can gain knowledge and understanding of language by seeing lots and lots and lots of examples. It looks at training data, it learns, and it learns by forming associations, just like the neurons in our brain do. So I've drawn that little sort of brain on the right side to kind of show an example of these things that we call tokens. Language can be broken down into tokens, words, letters, punctuation, etc. And they'll have certain types of meaning, like the meaning of apple in the center there is associated with pie, with a computer, with the color red, and with a tree. What's also associated with a tree is an acorn. So all that information gets stored by the connections that happen in our brain or the connections in the software, these artificial neural networks. And that's how understanding and that's how knowledge is gained, is all the connections. The big advancement came in AI around 2017, 2018. It came out in a paper from Google where they were able to build a neural network that worked in parallel. That means all the information, all those little associations could be analyzed all at once rather than go sequentially one at a time through a path. And that's the same as what our brains can do. That's also why GPUs took off. You heard all the NVIDIA took off in terms of it becoming, multi-billion dollar, almost trillion-dollar company because its computer processors could work in parallel, which was different from the original CPUs that worked in series. So that's just sort of an aside, but it gets what's the connection between NVIDIA GPUs and artificial intelligence? That's it. It's this parallel processing, and that mimics biology because we can process in multiple areas of our brain all at the same time. That's basically what a large language model. So it's not I put that up there because it's not super, super complicated. I mean, there's a lot of underpinnings that make it complicated to build it, but the actual concept of how knowledge gets stored is not too complicated. And once we understand this, it makes more sense some of the things we're going to talk about later. You've probably heard of pretty much all of these examples of LLMs. They all produce their own LLMs along with the chatbot that interfaces with that LLM. What's common between most of those, not all of them, is what OpenAI refers to as a GPT. That's a proprietary term, but they all kind of use the same sort of modeling where the output is generative. That means it's synthesizing something brand new. It doesn't copy what it's learned. It takes what it's learned and it can take new examples, new connections, go, oh, if I, kind of look at the connections that I observed in my training and I make a new connections, but something similar, I can output something new. And that's a lot like what we do. We observe over our lifetimes. Musicians will hear all types of music and then they'll write a new song, but it's based on what they observed over that time. So they can be creative based on other data, just like ChatGPTs or AI can be creative. And some people believe that AI is not creative, but definition creative is just creating something new based on what you've learned. And that's exactly what AIs do. So they can be creative. I think just recently we heard of a song going #1 on the charts that was written by AI, which is a little bit scary, but just goes to show you that it can generate new things. So that's important that it's generative and it synthesizes things. Next thing is pre-trained on limited data and time. So that's important. So if you ask a question of an AI chatbot, that's something that just came out yesterday in the news, it probably won't have been trained on it. Now it can find that because LLMs have the ability to look up things on the web to understand new things in real time. If you ask it to, it will. But since it's not trained on it, it might not output the best information on that. So that's an important fact to know, maybe to tell students that there's cutoff times when these models are developed of training data, and anything newer than that cutoff time may not be as accurate. The other thing that it happens after that pre-training is it gets aligned. So there's all that observation of all that data. And then when it gets aligned afterwards, it's told, okay, don't do anything dangerous. Don't do anything that's harmful. Basically, the LLM gets told, you have these kind of guidelines, these rules when you're going to output things. And that in the beginning, those weren't very good. And there was a lot of hallucinations going on, but that hallucination level has dropped significantly. The data that comes out of there is typically pretty good when it comes to certain types of data. So if you imagine you're asking about something that's really niche, that there's very little of information available on the web, obviously a ChatGPTs or Gemini or Claude aren't going to know that topic very well. So have students think about, if I'm asking about this topic that's very niche, that there's very little information available on, AI is not going to help me very much on that. If it's something that's a lot of knowledge around it, it can probably help you more. The other factor to consider, there's LLMs like Grok and Meta AI, which are social media based AIs. So they're going to be trained on information out there in social media world, which can be useful in some places, like if you want to come up with a marketing campaign, you want to understand the sort of zeitgeist of what's going on out there in the world. Maybe they can help you, but not quite as helpful when it comes to if you're understanding biology, for example, or understanding nutrition, things like that. Things that would be science-based, you want to go towards models that like Gemini and Claude and ChatGPT, which are trained more on encyclopedic style data. So that's going to have better accuracy typically, with certain caveats. And then last, the transformer architecture, that's just based the neural network type architecture, that parallel processing. That was that big forward development back in 2018 that happened that it allows um, all the processing to happen in parallel, which makes it much faster and able to access much more knowledge at the same time. So that was a huge advancement. So that's basically what LLMs are. Is they're sort of types of GPTs that are generative, they're pre-trained, which is limited on data, and they use that transformer architecture. The more latest advancement, not many people have heard of these LRMs, even though they've actually been out for several months now. These are large reasoning models. So just like our prefrontal cortex and the frontal lobe of our brain does higher order processing. In fact, it has an awareness, like the rest of the brain processes information, and then the prefrontal cortex kind of examines that and reiterates, goes back through memories and go, does that make sense? And kind of wrestles with those ideas for a while. LRMs get tied to LLMs. So together, like ChatGPT, for example, has an LRM. And if you type in a prompt and suddenly you see it says thinking and there's a delay before you get a response, that's because it's using the LRM to reason through that response, which means it's typically better, not always, but typically a better response, but it will be slower. And it's definitely better for sequential type problem solving where you have to sort of iterate through things and go, okay, I'm going to propose this as a response. Then I'm going to reanalyze that response, say, does this work in this context? I'm going to look for different types of context, and then finally give a response that's efficient. So it can be really useful in that regard. Any questions? I know I'm moving fairly quick, I think.
No questions so far.
Okay, feel free to chime in anytime at a question. I'd rather answer it in context rather than wait for the end. So if you have any questions, please throw them in the chat or let me know if I'm going too slow, too fast, etc. So what are AI strengths? Knowing all that we know about AI based on those first few slides now, what are the strengths? Obviously, speed, way quicker than a person can answer. Knowledge is vast and relatively current. I did mention that cutoff time. That's why that asterisk is there. But it is still current. If you talk to a person who hasn't studied a topic for a while, their knowledge may be years old on it. And LLMs will be much more current, and they update them fairly often now. Gemini 3 just came out, which is a big advancement, and every month or so, there's new models coming out. A lot of flexibility. This is unique. So when you talk to an expert on something, they're going to be of that one opinion. They're one perspective, they're one person, they've had one sort of lifetime of experience. But an AI is trained on a whole bunch of different information from all different perspectives, and it can take on different tones. It can say, you can ask AI to say, teach me as if I'm a kindergartner, or teach me as if I'm a PhD, or I don't know, do this very objectively or do this in a funny style. And it can adapt and do all those different things. So there's a lot of flexibility in the way AI can respond, but that's all based on the prompts. So we're going to get into this sort of the importance of the prompt more and more, and it's going to come up again, 24/7. Doesn't sound like much first, but when you think about learning, learning happens best when someone has the question in that moment. So if a student is studying late at night and they don't have a professor or instructor to answer a question, but AI is right there in that moment, that's just that much more convenient and that much more conducive to learning. Because when you get questions answered in the moment, you tend to remember them better. Memory and consistency. Now, with the latest models of ChatGPT, you can paste an entire novel or upload an entire novel into an AI conversation, and it will remember every single word in that upload. And you can ask it a question on literary analysis, for example, and it'll be able to pull from any quote there. Tell me any person that can do that, and that'd be pretty amazing. I mean, maybe there's a few people with eidetic memory who could do that, but very few. This thing has a huge, vast memory in a single conversation. It can remember that. and it can be consistent throughout. It doesn't change like us. We're prone to moods, time of day, how hungry you are, things like that. AI will be consistent in the way it responds. Reduced bias, asterisk there. So yes, we all know that AI can inherit the biases of the information that it's trained on, but because it's trained on such a vast array of information, those biases can typically cancel each other out, whereas a single person is one perspective, they're going to have all the biases of that. So it has the power of the group to reduce bias in that way. But it it may not be aware of its bias, so it's always important to recognize that there could be bias, especially based on the way you design prompts, which is why we'll talk about those more later. So what are the limitations? Um, you might know about these. AI likes to produce likable responses over accurate responses. That is changing, however. The latest guidelines or alignments that they do on these models are leaning more towards the accuracy and away from the likable, and that can also depend on the way you prompt it. But because it produces responses that are likable more often than not, people will automatically think that they're true. And that's true when you're talking to a person too. Get politicians or market people or whoever will say things that crowds like, even if it's not true, and they tend to believe it. And if students understand this going into a conversation with an AI chatbot, say, it's going to tell you something that you like that may not be true, then they're going to be better armed to second guess that response. It takes a very complimentary tone. It likes to butter you up. It can miss in creativity sometimes. This is a subjective thing. Again, I mentioned this before. So what we define as creative is a sort of a changing or sometimes ambiguous definition. So sometimes it's creative, but maybe not in all cases. So that's why I put that asterisk there. It's not great with novelty because it doesn't use heuristics like humans do, where we can kind of approximate things. That, for example, um, you hear a sound in the bush and you don't know what it is. Immediate thought is danger. You don't sit there and analyze, what pitch was that sound? What animal could that be? What was the bush that it hit? You're not going through that algorithmic analysis. You're just going, that could be danger. I'm going to run or hide, depending on where you are. So it's a quick analysis heuristic. It's not good with that. It does more of a detailed algorithmic analysis. At this point, that is something that researchers are looking at, maybe mimicking more in the future, but right, it's not there yet. Input and output is restricted. So typically AI chatbots take in language. They don't take in other types of information yet. Again, like perceptual information around space and distance, or other sensory information like smell, proprioception, all those types of things. So it is limited and its output is limited. Voice recognition apparently has gotten really good lately. So that even that you don't have to type anymore. It can understand voice and output voice pretty well too. So it is restricted, but it's lessening over time. It avoids, I don't know. That's important. Students will expect that if it comes back with a response, it'll assume, oh, it must know. And they should never make that assumption, because it will want to give you a response that's more likable than I don't know. I don't know tends to be a not very likable response from a human perspective. So it tends to avoid that. So we'll talk about some prompting. That's why I've bolded prompt quality there to address most of these limitations, as well as some other limitations I did put on here. So prompt quality is critical for setting up good responses or good interactions with chatbots, AI chatbots. Okay, so best practice for student educators. Now that we've got that kind of heavy definition stuff out of the way, getting into some practical things. Doesn't mean there's going to be less information. It just means it's a more practical side. So I love this quote from Einstein. It's not the ability to store information, but to know where to find it. So if you're old enough to remember when calculators first were allowed in schools at all, there was a big hubbub about it that, people aren't going to be able to do math anymore. Calculators are critical, et cetera, et cetera. And nowadays, calculators are everywhere in math. It allows people to focus on a higher order mathematical calculations and reasoning, rather than the grunt stuff of just simply adding, subtracting, that type of thing. Or sometimes, in the case of calculus, working on integrals and things like that. So calculators were accepted, Computers were eventually selected. You see laptops and phones, smart devices uh, in classrooms all the time. And that's because intelligence is not the ability to store the information, it's knowing where to find it. And that's basically what AI is going to be in this next tool. So we're going to teach you how to use it though. Calculators can be abused. There is some value in just doing rote math before you get into the higher order stuff. So it is important to use AI properly so that it enhances rather than diminishes learning. So I'm going to pull the audience here since I've been doing most of the talking and everybody's been quiet. I'm hoping people will put into the chat. So get your hands on your keyboard or if you have voice input. When do you think students should use it then? And when should they not use it? Anyone want to volunteer and answer in the chat? Please do so now. Just want to get people thinking about when should AI be used and when should it not be used for student understanding. And I'm going to give some answers, so don't think I'm just depending on you, but hopefully we'll be thinking about it.
Give people a quick minute here.
Sure.
Make sure everybody's found the chat. Should be at the bottom of your screen if you're able to enter a message in. So we have use it for assistance or prompting, not using it to disguise their intelligence or knowledge base,
Mhm.
to study or help organize their thoughts, to refine or improve their thinking or work.
Yeah.
And the second part of that was to replace thinking,
Yes.
and using for brainstorming.
Good. Okay, so you guys, it looks like you're aligning with what I will be talking about, but I'll break it down in a very specific way. So project-based work is a great use for AI because there is the mixture in project-based work or longer assignments of the higher order thinking and then sort of the grunt work of just sort of writing it out or spitting out information or sometimes reading information that is very long and finding the key pieces of information in there. I mean, that has value in itself, true, but um, if you're going to do project-based work, have the students record keep. If you're going to assign it, have the students record keep, meaning track what they prompted the AI with to as part of their project and what it responded with, and then how they reacted to that response, to that AI response. So that record keeping is going to be critical. Now that sounds like a lot of information to go through when it's graded or reviewed by an instructor or professor. But they're focal points that you can work on and ignore the rest as long as they have that project record kept. And that's going to be critical for when they get out into the work world too, because they're going to need to sort of prove the point of where did this come from. Study guide, practice assessment, a bunch of people mentioned those type things. Yeah, if they have all the information and they need to kind of summarize it and get like a little study guide, they can generate little practice tests. These AIs are really good at it. It can give you memory tricks. They're having a problem remembering, okay, I got to remember, they're taking an anatomy course, just as an example. I remember anatomy course that I took was one of the hardest ones. So much memorization, and it was very difficult. If I had more tricks of going, okay, I have a song for this, or I have a mnemonic for this type thing, it can provide those things and really help with that type of information. Good at introducing topics. And this, I think, is going to flip the classroom even more than back when the flipped classroom model was big and popular, because this will allow students to kind of learn the topic in the beginning using AI, using maybe a Socratic method. They can tell the AI chatbot, use a Socratic method to teach me about X, making sure to cover these topics. And it will do that. It will start to prompt questions of the student and they'll have to answer them and learn through that Socratic method, which is really a valuable way to do that. And then the review can happen in the classroom. So now that the topic's been introduced that way, rather than a lecture, which has been proven to be one of the worst ways to introduce topics, now you can go into sort of applying that information in an activity-based format in a classroom. So it's really good for that. Remediation for getting people caught up on things if they're behind, or extension the other way. And of course, reviewing your own work, having someone give you feedback immediately on what you're guessing or trying to accomplish. And people mentioned that in the chat, so I appreciate it. That is, it's like having a professor right there all the time to kind of give you feedback. Am I doing this right? Why or why not? And it's important to tell the student to ask those questions of why. And AI is actually really good at doing that on its own. If you say, look at this assignment and tell me what I did right or wrong, it will explain that, and it usually provides all the explanations of why, like, oh, this works better than this because X, Y, and Z. So, and people mention this one, not, yeah, you don't want it giving answers. Obviously, that just skips over what the student should be working on. They should not be getting it to write an essay for them, but they can write the essay themselves and then have the AI review it and tell them, why this doesn't work or why this does work. So having that immediate feedback, really useful. And not as a research source, but as maybe a research finder, a lot like Wikipedia. So Wikipedia is an aggregation of research and it cites all its sources, and you can look up those sources, and those are the sources you want to be using, not AI itself or Wikipedia itself. Okay, so that means we need to restructure our coursework. So when it comes to an FYE program in particular, you're going to need to do, in probably any course that allows AI, you're going to want to restructure things a little bit to allow for that. So rather than have people hand in big long assignments that they created all on their own, knowing that some of that could have been created by AI, it's probably good to require some level of presentation, or just like when you're presenting your PhD thesis, some kind of defense, so that, and hopefully live if possible, or maybe online, depending on how your course set up, so that they can explain what they did. And so doing the work was just to get them to a point that you can measure their knowledge, in a live environment where they're able to defend or present their findings. Having them share AI conversations. That's really easy in most AI tools. Once you get to the end of a conversation in ChatGPT or Gemini or any of the big ones, there's a little button somewhere that says share, and it'll share a link, and they could share that with their instructor as part of an assignment hand in, and say, here's the conversation I had with the chatbot. Here are the prompts I did. And you could be grading on the prompts, not on the responses and the reactions to those responses of the student. So what the student input in rather than what the AI created. So that's another way to kind of tease out the knowledge from the student while allowing them to learn through the AI. And use it for reflection. So have the student explain their prompts. Why did you use that prompt? Why did you think it would be better? How did your prompts change over time? What sources support the AI response? You can ask AI for sources, and they have to do it. It won't do it on its own typically. Design the prompt around that. And then for each source, describe how it supports the response. And for however many sources, depending on how you want to assign students, what did the AI miss? So that's having the student kind of grade the AI. So it's sort of a back and forth. The student presents their first work, the AI reviews it and says what's right or wrong, and then the student reflects on, they don't have to agree with everything the AI said. It can, hey, what did it do well, and what I disagree with in terms of the way the AI described my original work. And then providing personal relevant examples. That's a really good one because AI doesn't know each individual unless there's some kind of famous person in your class, I suppose. But typically, if they're using personal examples, that can't be faked by an AI, and that can be focused on for grading. Some people have taken it so far as requiring handwritten responses, which of course could be copied off an AI screen, but it makes it a little bit harder. So I'm not a big fan of that one myself, but I know some people use it to some success. Shift the grade weighting. So rather than have, all these hand-in assignments count for most of the grade, instead of the defense and the presentations of their work can carry more of the grade weighting. And that way it's not all based on what the AI produces, and it's more based on what the student actually produces. So all these things would help with restructuring the coursework to accommodate using AI to help students learn more, because they can learn more, but you have to make sure you're grading the right things to measure that. So when it comes to prompting and actually getting in, now we're getting into details of, we're kind of zooming in on what the student is doing and what you are doing as educators, because I'm sure you're going to have, you've already talked about having conversations with AI. I mean, I do it on a daily basis. At the beginning of that conversation, you set the tone for the AI. And this is really important. So I've put a bunch of bullets here. I'm not going to read them all out, but basically they're about making sure that the AI produces accurate answers, that it's not overly complimentary, dealing with all those limitations on that earlier slide, basically. It's something that I think we all dream of the current news could do a little bit better in terms of being really objective and accurate and admitting how confident they are in this answer based on evidence, actual evidence, observed evidence. So you can, I think we're going to get a copy of this slide presentation. Tamara will make sure it gets sent out, and you can literally copy paste these particular tone setters, conversation tone setters, into the beginning of an AI conversation, and it'll change drastically the way it responds to provide much more accurate, much more balanced, less biased information. So feel free to use that or tweak it however you want to make it work for you and your students. Maybe it's something you provide in the syllabus to students at the beginning of the semester saying, hey, if you're going to use AI, I want you to use these tone setting prompts for the conversation before you begin any conversation with AI. And they're going to get much better information as a result. And then maybe the challenge at the end of the semester for students is, hey, create your own prompts for setting the conversational tone that will work for this assignment, because you may use a slightly different tone setting depending on what the assignment is. But that will work. Once it memorizes that, the rest of the conversation should remain in that type of tone. Because like I remember before, I said the AI is highly flexible in the way it delivers the information. You just have to tell it to do it that way. The other, and I put this at the bottom, and I mentioned this earlier, another way to do is act as a teacher using a Socratic method. So it will respond with questions rather than answers. And that's a great way for sort of introducing a topic or maybe clarifying something the student is confused about, saying, teach me about this using the Socratic method. And that's another way to set up a good conversation with AI. I just want to get a sense out there if I am hitting on the type of information that you guys are looking for from this webinar. It's really hard for me to understand given the silence of these presentations, but maybe in the chat, if you give me a thumbs up, say, hey, I'd like to hear something else. Anything you want to, okay, I'm getting one, great, that's good. One is better than nothing.
And there will also be a survey at the end, but yeah, I see another slide's been especially helpful.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to do a little practice then. And we're going to practice how to engineer prompts. And this is critical for you as educators, but also for students. And I'm going to give you a takeaway exercise at the end that will help students understand how to prompt better as well. So I took this prompt. What are 3 reasons to ban using AI in schoolwork? A little bit of an awkward sentence, I just realized now that I've read it out loud. But what kind of response do you think an AI chatbot would provide for this? And I'm going to move quickly to this because otherwise we're going to run out of time. But basically, it's going to give you reasons to ban. It's going to be basically on the side of banning it because your prompt pushed it in that direction. There was a certain bias in the way you prompted. It's going to name things that are negative in terms of AI and schoolwork. Yeah, it can affect academic integrity. It can take away authentic learning. It can, inhibit skill development, critical thinking, and it has problems with equity and fairness. All those things can be true if AI isn't used properly. So here's the next prompt I used. What are 3 reasons to allow using AI in schoolwork? So just by changing one word in a prompt, you're going to get a very different answer. And this illustrates for you and for students how important the prompt is in terms of the information that you get. So now it's just going to give me 3 reasons that it's great, that it can enhance learning support. It can prepare students for the future. Of course, AI is taking over, just like learning about computers in the early 80s, or maybe if 90s, if you're a little bit later to the game, prepared you for the future because everybody uses them now. And it can encourage creativity and efficiency. And that's because, like with the calculator thing, it takes away some of that grunt work and you can focus on the higher order thinking and be more productive for that matter. But both of these prompts are here to illustrate that you're going to introduce a bias. And a third prompt, if you look at the top, don't read the rest yet, but just the third prompt, briefly summarize the current research on the impact of students using AI to do schoolwork. So just that sentence on its own doesn't guide the AI in one direction or the other. It just says, what is the impact? It doesn't say, is it negative? Is it positive? It just says, what is the impact? And it says current research. That's important. Rather than just say, what's the opinion of this? Because if you just ask, what's your opinion of AI schoolwork? It's going to look for opinions and not actual research. So designing prompts with the words, using the current research and what is the impact are two ways to kind of get rid of that bias and get more to actual evidence-based thing. Say that, is there evidence? That's another great way to start a sentence to show that there is an effective way. And you ask it, is it? Don't say, what evidence shows that there's effective ways? You want to say, is there evidence to say, is there evidence against or for? So you're trying to be neutral in that prompt, and teaching students to be very neutral in their prompts is going to have a lot of value. So this was the response it gave. It's just to show you that it provides a nice organized response. It gave an overall, it gave the strongest evidence. RCTs, by the way, is randomized controlled trials. So there is good evidence for it. And what works best, basically, guided use, just like we've been talking about so far. Clear rules, oversight, asking for reflection, and asking AI for feedback better than say it, write it for me. So we talked about the student first doing their little bit, having the AI review it, and then having them reflect on that review and looking at the student's prompts, not at the AI's response. So of course, unguided reliance can be bad. So that's why we want to be very guided when we're using AI. And there are, in case people are interested, and that's why I put these on the slide, these are links to the actual sources that support this. So I'm trying to practice what I preach to say, if I'm going to show you an AI response, I need to have the sources, and these are from science, and they're good, basically, sources. I'm not going to get into the whole thing of what defines a reliable source. That's for another time if you haven't already covered it, but there's that. So this is the takeaway that I'm talking about. Don't worry about reading this whole thing. I'm just going to summarize it because I think this can be a very valuable sort of project in an FYE program. I've written a book on FYE, been to many FYE conferences and development seminars and things like that. So I do have some experience there. And this one is all about AI awareness for the student, both from literal perspective of they're going to research it, but they're also going to use it. So practice what they preach sort of thing. So it's divided in two parts. One is self-assessment. So this can work with most self-assessments. We happen to, as a company, and we do have an interested. That's why we're presenting this webinar today. We do have a product that has self-assessments in it, everything from multiple intelligences, personality type, learning and productivity preferences, and skills. And they can use one or more of those for self-assessment, or if you happen to have another one at your institution that you like to use with students, feel free to use that with your students. And they're going to use the AI to kind of interpret the report from that. Because typically the reports that you get from assessments can be long, and sometimes students don't know what to look at first. So they're going to use AI to kind of summarize what's important here in terms of my learning and extract from that. Again, record prompts and responses. That's critical for these types of assignments. OYO is on your own. So forcing the student, you got to write this on your own and show that you have done so, because it probably will have to defend it later. And then for each of those three summarized preferences, describe how you might apply them. So we're getting into that personal. How would you apply them in your classes? Don't ask an AI, how can this apply generally? You need to tell me how this will apply to you personally. And so that's the way to kind of get around that AI doing the work for them. Then part B is going to be identify practical AI supported methods. So kind of what we were talking about before with the for and against. So either research different methods that students can use AI to improve learning, and identify at least one way that it has a negative impact on learning. So knowing what it should not be used for, in other words. So again, reliable resources, record prompts and responses and sources. And then they're reflecting on it. That's the reflect part. So after they use the AI to generate the information, they have to reflect on it on their own, and they have to get it to align with their own learning preferences. So this is personalized with their particular coursework and something that they would actually use. And of course, that it adheres to the AI guidelines at their institution or their course. and then a follow-up right. So this is an awareness project that probably could happen over the course of maybe a week, as a guess. But really, this is just a project outline, I'll call it. And what I did, and this is something that um, I'm modeling to encourage you to do that. This is really just an outline. So to flesh this out in terms of how am I going to actually deliver this to students? What am I going to expect in terms of the amount of writing? How am I going to grade this with a rubric? What are the learning outcomes, et cetera, et cetera? Well, I asked AI to do that for me. That's kind of the grunt work. So I wrote that previous outline because I just wanted the high order thinking. I was really thinking about, how should I model this to work with AI in a way that it'll resonate with students and it'll work with them based on my experience. Then I got AI to kind of do the grunt work for me, and it told me some pretty cool stuff here, sometimes humbling stuff because I forgot in my role as an educator that yes, I should be thinking about these things. So and of course, when I prompted it, I said, be objective, use evidence-based. I used all those things that I told you before, and this is what it told me, key opportunities for enhancing the outline. And then if you wanted to do things like, get the get the learning outcomes, create a rubric, it can do all that for you, some of that grunt work. So don't be afraid to use AI for stuff like this. Of course, you want to be designing activities, designing your overall course yourself, but get AI to do some of that grunt work for you so that you can focus on the higher order stuff. It can even produce a template. I think it offered at one point to create a PDF template that you could hand out to students to fill in all the information from the assignment with all the right space and the prompts and the headings and everything for me. So that was another really cool thing that it could do. And so you're going to get this. I encourage you to do that. Well, you don't have to take these, plug in the outline yourself with your own prompts and get it to flesh out the assignment in the way that you want it to work for your students. So last thing, and I'm just about on time, I think. Fun little graphic on the right to kind of call back to the original poll, the future of AI. So right now, like I mentioned, input output is limited, but it is rapidly gaining multi-sensory integration. I know there's companies like Waymo with cars. Their all their input on their AI is based on, position and space and things like that. So they can easily piggyback that type of model, that machine learning model, with a language model, with a reasoning model, with other models that take in, and it's going to get that multi-sensory integration, which could lead to something called AGI, artificial general intelligence, which is supposedly the holy grail of AI, which would basically be human equivalent. And my personal feeling is we're not that far away from it. People are saying different things. Some people are saying it's only a few years away. Some people are saying it's a few decades away. Some people say it'll never happen. Um, Probably somewhere in the middle there. But a good way to think about it is to liken this to the way people viewed computers in the early 80s. These were predictions that we saw that there's going to be mass unemployment from automation, the complete end of office work. While people still work in the office, less so, it's true, mostly because of COVID and telecommuting at this point, but it went away much slower than early predictors did. Widening inequality, very true. However, it did go up and down. Sometimes inequality, especially in the beginning, because computers were very expensive, lower socioeconomic individuals did not have as much access. That's sort of the problem, but eventually did catch up a bit. There are countries around the world where they don't have classrooms, they can't afford to build schools, but there are people who have devices because they're much cheaper and they're getting education that they wouldn't be able to otherwise. So sometimes it just needs to catch up, basically. But we should be aware that there will be inequality in these early stages. People with access to better reasoning models, for example, as opposed to people who have the freeware models type thing. So, or even just access to computers in general. We know there are people that still around the world have no internet, no computers, that type of thing. So we do have to pay attention to those things. But bottom line is computer literacy at that time did lead to economic opportunity. And that's kind of going to be the same thing now. I know Meta, a bunch of big tech companies recently announced that they are scoring employees based on their use of AI, and that the better they use AI, they'll be more considered for promotion, better bonuses, things like that. Now that's in the tech space, and they tend to be the kind of tip of the spear in that regards. And but other industries will catch up to that. The use of AI is going to be prevalent, just like the use of computers now, and people are going to need to learn it. So these schools that are trying to ban AI outright are putting their students at a disadvantage. Students are going to need to learn these skills of using AI in good ways so that they can be more effective. Not only, I think, as workers or employers, wherever they end up, but even in their personal lives. I know I've been able to troubleshoot computer problems with using AI. I've been able to fix a dryer by using AI. I mean, it can help you in a lot of different ways if you use it right. So bottom line is, I think you shouldn't let AI think for you. Definitely true, but you can let it think with you. So yeah, I just wanted to leave it there. And I don't know, do you want to talk about this, Tamara? Or do you want me to talk about this part?
Yeah, you can chime in, but just a little bit of a notice that today's content was kind of based as we were updating College Scope, which is an online curriculum, online student success textbook that can be used for FYE programs. And the fifth edition will be coming out in January. And so there's references now, a big part of that update is referencing artificial intelligence throughout the chapters. And part of that includes a new chapter on information and study skills. So if you'd like to learn more about that, please contact Carla Lundman. She'll actually be the one who's sending out the email to you, and she can put you on the wait list for letting you know as soon as the new edition, the fifth edition, is available. Or you can have a look at the fourth edition and how it works. It is an interactive textbook as well, so it is kind of different than an ebook or other online textbooks. And with that, if we have any questions, we're happy to field them and answer what we can. If you want to just type them into the chat, and if you have an anonymous question you want to ask anonymously, you can use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen.
Yeah. I'll mention one more thing about College Scope. It does integrate seamlessly with learning management systems. So if you use like Canvas, D2L, Blackboard, whatever, so it can be just added to a course really easily like that. And it's a good curriculum. I mean, I'm biased. I helped write it. So but it does use a lot of the techniques that we talked about today in that new chapter in information and study skills. So if you found today helpful, then I think you will find this helpful too.
We have some thank yous, no questions, but just wanted to say thank you.
Well,
So
appreciate it. You're very welcome. Yeah, talk to Carla, and if you end up wanting to talk to me again, she can get you in touch with me. I'd be happy to have a conversation about AI or anything to do around FYE. So yeah, feel free to reach out. And yeah, thank you for coming out today.
great. And Carla is on the call today, and she's reminding us all that there is a live demo available as well that she can do. And so with that, I will close the webinar and say thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for coming and participating. Oh, we do have one comment here. Some people say it's fearing to believe all humanity's thoughts will be in a central knowledge repository. What are your thoughts on this
That's
belief?
interesting. I mean, I think a lot of it will be in there, but like I said, we are constantly changing. We have that ability to adapt in real time, which AI at this point does not. So it can't, because the minute it thinks it's updated, the next second everything is changed. So I don't think that's going to happen there. But if we have, all the knowledge to look up and find at any point, I think that's a net positive in a way. It's really about the goals of AI. Hopefully, we keep the guardrails on, and just like that famous I, Robot movie where there was the three sort of commands type thing. As long as we keep the right guardrails on AI, we should be fine. I think humans are a bigger danger at this point than AI.
Great. No, thank you so much for your question. Appreciate that. And thank you so much. I hope you have a great day.